are on Daf Mem Tes Amud Beis 49b, and we've been learning some new halachas about people who make mistakes in their benching, and when can you, what can you do to fix up the mistake that you made? In other words, a person forgot to say ritzei, forgot to say Yalav V'Yavai. So Ritzei we add on Shabbos, Yalav V'Yavai we add on Chodesh or on Yontiv or on Chol HaMoyed. And these are common things that occur on a regular basis. We forget to add in these additions a lot of times because we don't always bench with a sitter. We bench by heart. Or even if you bench with a siddur, we feel rushed for whatever reason. We rush through, we don't think for a moment, or we're just dreaming off a little and forget that it's Yom Tov, or that it's Rosh Chodesh, or that it's Shabbos. So our Gemara here dealt with this issue. And of course, we've been dealing with benching now for months. We've been talking about benching. So now we're dealing with this issue of adding in these additions, and if you forgot them, repeating the benching, and so on. So let's go over the Gemara that we learned. So the Gemara had started on 49a, and it mentioned that Reb Zera had repeated this dialogue between Rav Gidel and Rav Huna. So Rav Gidel and Rav Huna had a dialogue about Rav Gidel was mentioning some halachas in front of Rav Huna. Rav Huna asked him who's the source and so on, and mentioned a few of these halachas. And what did they have to do with? If a person forgot to say ritzei, so you could add a certain sentence after the Uvanei Bracha. And he said that's from Rav. Rav had said that. Then Rav Gidel said another statement from in front of Rav Huna, and he said you forgot Yom Tov. You forgot to say Yalav V'Yavai, which is the addition we add in the benching for Yom Tov. And he said if you forgot it, you could add a certain sentence. Baruch Shanasan Yom Tovim Am Yisrael Simcha. Okay, who said that? Rav. Okay, Rav said that as well. What about Rosh Chodesh? He said Rosh Chodesh, person made a mistake. He could say the a sentence for if got Yalav V'Yavai on Rosh Chodesh. Could say a sentence Baruch Shanas and Rosh Chodesh Lam Yisrael Bil Zikaron. And the way Rashi understands it is that Reb Zera is not sure about all the details of this final ruling about Rosh Chodesh. There's a few details that he's unsure. He's not sure, should you say the word simcha there? He's not sure, do you conclude the Baruch Mekadesh Yisrael V'Rosh Chodashim or not? Do you not conclude at all? Don't say the end bracha, like it starts off with a bracha, Baruch Shanasan Rosh Chodashim Lam Yisrael Zikaron, but then do you conclude it with Baruch, another word Baruch, and you would conclude similar Baruch Mekadesh Yisrael Rosh Chodashim. Do you conclude it that way, similar to Yom Tov or not? So that's one thing he doesn't know. Simcha, he doesn't know about the conclusion of that bracha. Are you supposed to have that conclusion? And the third thing is he's not sure if Rav said this, Rav Gidel said this in the name of Rav, or if Rav Gidel had just mentioned it himself. In other words, the other two cases he had quoted Rav. This one he wasn't sure. So three things that Rav Gidel is, Rav Zera is unsure if what the ruling is Rosh Chodesh regarding Rav Gidel's statement about Rosh Chodesh. Now, then the Gemara brought a story over here about a different Rav Gidel, Gidel Bar Minyomi, who was in front of Rav Nachman. His name was also Gidel, and he made a mistake. The case was that Rav Nachman had made a mistake, and Rav Nachman ended up going all the way back to the beginning. So it was either Shabbos or it was Yontiv. Anyway, he went back to the beginning of the benching. And basically, the Gemara is a little surprised because why did he do that? Gidel asked Rav Nachman, why did you do that? We know from Rav that Sheila said the name of Rav that I'm sorry, why did you do that to go all the way back? So Rav Nachman answered him, because we know from Rav that you do have to go back. So Gidel asks, didn't Rav Huna say in the name of Rav that you could just add a whole sentence? So the answer that Rav Nachman answers him back is that what your source that you're telling me, didn't we learn that there's a qualification to that? You can't always just say that sentence. That's only if you didn't start Hatoiva HaMeitiv. But if you started Hatoiva HaMeitiv, then you cannot just say that sentence. Now, on Wednesday, when we learned, I mentioned to you that there's a whole debate over here. The Chaye Adam says that even if you said Baruch Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, it's good enough. You could then just conclude that Baruch Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam that you said from the fourth bracha. You could just use that for this addition that you're supposed to add, and that would be good enough. And I mentioned to you that in the Biur Halacha they asked a big question on this because you really concluded your three brachas of benching. So how would you be allowed to say, oh, well, I could still, say that additional sentence and I don't have to go back? You started your fourth bracha. You already concluded the three brachas and you started your fourth bracha. And therefore, it's questionable how the Chayyim holds. Now, the Sifsei Chachamim says, if you just said Baruch Atah, that's good. That you're okay. You can because you didn't say Hashem's name yet, so that's a little more understandable. But even that is not so simple because the fact is you started the fourth bracha already. So what I did, and I told you I'd look it up in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch. What I did find is very interesting that the Alter Rebbe has in chapter 188. He writes like this, and I mentioned to you that I had a feeling that the word Baruch itself should be the final cutoff. I said we want to find out exactly what is the cutoff. So here in chapter 188, in paragraph 9, the Alter Rebbe in his Shulchan Aruch, he says, if he remembers, he had forgotten. The case was that he had forgotten Yom Tov and Yalav Yavai and so on. So in the case, so what happens is if he remembers after he started Hatoiva HaMeitiv, even if he only said the word Baruch, he cannot catch up by adding a sentence because it's not in its place. You have to go all the way back to the beginning because the three brachas of Brachos Hamazon are considered like one bracha. And any of the laws that you have to go back, you got to go back to the beginning, and that would be the rule here with the first. If you forgot something that's supposed to be recited in the first three brachas of benching and you missed out, if you said the word Baruch, that's already too much. So the cutoff word, according to the Alter Rebbe, is Baruch, which is very understandable, because you did start the new bracha already. That word Baruch, although the word Baruch, you could say, I want to use it towards the sentence that I have to add in. But the fact is, in your mind, you started with the word Baruch towards the fourth bracha already, which means you were Mesiach Das, you already turned your mind from and concluded what you were doing before, meaning the first three brachas were concluded. Once you say the word Baruch, you've concluded the previous three brachas. So it's already the fourth bracha, and you can't add it in the fourth bracha. So that's the way the Alter Rebbe says, which I think fits very well with the way the Mishnah Berurah, the Biur Halacha, questions the Chayei Adam. It seems very understandable, his reason, meaning like the Biur Halacha seemed to follow that logic that the Alter Rebbe uses, and that's why he asks a big question. The word tema, like a wonder how the Chayei Adam could paskin this way, because once you were Mesiach Das, you already started the fourth bracha. It's already too late. Yes, Yehuda.
But if you said the word Baruch and have to go back to the beginning, then aren't you saying Hashem's name in vain?
So the way it works is that you ultimately, if you have to repeat the benching, you will end up have said Hashem's name in vain. The question is, should you do that? You already did the mentioning Hashem's name in vain. If you have to repeat it, it means you already did Hashem's name in vain. So of course you should repeat it, because the name of Hashem you already said in vain because you messed up. The new prayer is going to be the appropriate prayer. So, of course, we would like you to find a solution that retroactively it wasn't in vain. For example, if you missed out Ritzei, so you forgot it was Shabbos, and you forgot to say Ritzei. So the first three brachas of your benching are now in jeopardy. They might be considered in vain because you missed out Ritzei. But there is a solution. What is the solution? You already said Uvanei Yushalayim Baruch Ato Hashem B'nei Barachmav Yushalayim Amen. You already said the bracha of B'nei Barachmav, so you really missed out Ritzei. So your first three blessings might be in vain. They're in jeopardy now. Now, if you don't say Baruch for the fourth bracha, you could now add in a sentence that will fix up what you missed, the Ritzei, and it'll be in place of Ritzei. And because you didn't start the fourth bracha yet, you're okay to say that bracha now, and your previous brachas are not in vain. If you already said Baruch of the fourth bracha, guess what? You already ruined your first three brachas. They're all in vain. And now what can you do? You could bench, because your first benching was not a kosher benching. It's too late. It was somewhat in vain. Because you meant well, it was nice, you tried, you wanted to bench, but it ended up being in vain because you said something wrong, you missed something out, and so now you'll bench properly. Mistakes happen, but you're right. It's not that we're telling you to say a new bracha and it's maybe in vain. No, it's the old bracha that was in vain. It's too late. Now you messed up because you already started the next bracha, so your old bracha was in vain. So at least you should bench now properly. So that's what it boils down to. Okay, so the Gemara continues here, and mentions that Rav Idi bar Ravin, in the name of Rav Amram, in the name of Rav Nachman, in the name of Shmuel. If you forgot to say Rosh Chodesh in davening, you got to go back. In Berachas Hamazon, you don't have to go back. So again, for Rosh Chodesh, you're supposed to say Yalav Yavi. Both in the davening, you add it in after Ritzei, the davening, before V'secha Zena, you're supposed to add in Rosh Chodesh, Yalav Yavi. And in the benching, you're supposed to add in the Yalav Yavi before Uvanei. And there's a difference. If you missed it out in the davening, you got to go back. You missed it out in benching, you don't have to go back. So Rav Amram, Rav Idi bar Ravin asked Rav Amram, he wants to know what's the difference. Yes, Mordechai. You're muted.
Okay. Yeah, with the davening, actually, it's if you forget Yalo Yavo and Mahari for Rosh Chodesh,
Right.
you don't need
have to
read it.
Right. There is a Mordechai mentions to us that there is actually a leniency in Ma'ariv. In the Ma'ariv service, there is a leniency if you miss Yalav Yavai. Thanks for qualifying the ruling here. It doesn't apply to Ma'ariv, this statement. But if you miss Yalav Yavai, besides for Ma'ariv, if you miss Yalav Yavai on Rosh Chodesh, you do have to go back and say Shemona Esrei again. And
incidentally, there's that story with the Baal Shem Tov and the Misnagid who asked him some type of condescending question regarding not saying Yalla, about what happens if you forget Yalla V'Yavo in the davening, and the Baal Shem Tov replied that it's not really that relevant because I never forget to say Yalla V'Yavo, and you, even if you were to forget it and then daven Shemona Esrei a second time, you would forget it the second time.
Yeah, there's a cute story over there where the Alter Rebbe put this person was acting inappropriately to him, disrespectfully to the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe told him, if you would have forgotten, if you forget Yalav Yava, it's not worth repeating because you'll mess up the second time. Thank you, Mordechai. Yeah. Anyway, the bottom line is over here that there's a difference between if a person forgets Rosh Chodesh, for mentioning Yalav Yava, in davening, you have to repeat the Shemona Esrei. If you forget it in benching, you don't have to repeat the Shemona Esrei. So wants to know what's the difference. That's what Rav Idi Baravin or Rav Oven, they want to know. They asked Rav what's it. So Rav Amram answered him that I also wondered this, and I asked Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman wondered this, and he said I didn't hear from Shmuel, but because Shmuel was the one who told Rav Nachman this. But he said that let's try to figure it out. Let's use our own heads. So he gave an interesting point. He says, listen, in davening, you have to daven. So if you mess up your davening, you got to repeat it. Benching, no one told you have to eat, right? Who says you have to eat? You don't have to eat. So therefore, you don't have to repeat benching. If you ate and benched, you missed out Yalav Yava, you don't have to eat. So therefore, you don't have to repeat the benching. It's logical. In other words, this is a real obligation, davening, and therefore a real obligation. You got to do it right. The benching is not exactly an obligation to bench. So obligation if you ate, and if you ate, you try to add it in. But you missed out in the Yalav Yavai, Nishkavalach. So the Gemara asks, what do you mean? What about Shabbos and Yom Tov? Shabbos and Yom Tov, you have to eat. So would you have to repeat the benching then on Shabbos and Yom Tov? So the Gemara answers, yes, you'd have to go back. You actually would have to bench over again. She brings a source, Rav Shila Bar Amarav says, and now then he says, what about this bracha that you suppose you could add a bracha? You don't have to go back. So he says, did we learn about that? That's only if you didn't start the fourth bracha, but once you start the fourth bracha, it's too late. You're going to have to go back and bench all over again because you are obligated in eating on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. Yes, Ezra.
So if God had created us so that we didn't have to eat, I would agree with him 100%. But the fact of the matter is, if we don't eat, we don't do the other things as well. So therefore, just to say it's on Shabbat, you have to return and you have to go back, it's sort of disingenuous. I would say the requirement should be, God made us this way, and so therefore we should go back even on a regular weekday to say that, it doesn't make any sense.
So your question is a good question, and based on what Taisva says over here, I think it's answered. Taisva asks a very strong question about Rosh Chodesh. He says you're not allowed to fast on Rosh Chodesh; you have to eat on Rosh Chodesh. So you should have to repeat the benching. He says that we have a source that these are days that you're not allowed to fast. It says it in Megillus Tainus, which is a scroll that they had about the laws. There's different laws and customs, and it was called Megillus Tainus. In fact, it's still we still have this book. It talks about different holidays and different fast days that they had initially instituted and so on, to remember certain important days. Anyway, bottom line is, it says Rosh Chodesh is from those days that you're not allowed to fast. So he says, how could our Gemara here say if you want you could eat, if you don't want you have to eat on Rosh Chodesh. So therefore you should have to repeat the benching, right? It's a good strong question. He says, yeah, you have to eat on Rosh Chodesh. You can't fast, but do you have to eat a meal with challah? You have to eat a meal with bread and bench Birchas Hamazon? No, on Rosh Chodesh you're not allowed to fast, but you don't have to eat a meal with bread. So what it boils down to is this a day that you need to have a full-fledged su'uda? In other words, a bread meal. Do you need such a meal on this day? On Rosh Chodesh, you don't. On Rosh Chodesh, you have to eat something, but you don't need a meal with bread. On Shabbos and Yom Tov, you do. So because the benching on this day is not automatically necessary, therefore, and the eating bread is not automatically necessary, therefore, your benching, if you missed out with that addition, that it's not a necessary addition because this Yom Tov doesn't obligate this benching. In other words, your eating food, of course, obligates your benching, but the Yom Tov doesn't obligate this benching. It does obligate the davening. You need to add it in davening. You have to daven. So the Yom Tov necessitates a davening with the addition of this prayer, but the benching doesn't really obligate it because you're really not obligated in having bread on this holiday. So I think that answers your question, Ezra, because we're not saying that you don't need to eat to live. You need to eat. You need to eat to live. You just don't have to eat today. You have to eat today, but you don't have to eat challah today. So therefore, the addition, the benching, the holiday doesn't obligate the benching. That's what this seems to be the way of understanding this. Now, there is a very interesting discussion here. What is the law of Shalosh Shudas? A lot of people seem to be very lenient with Shalosh Shudas. Now, on the third meal of Shabbos, a lot of people, some shuls, they make a meal. Everyone gets together and they have a whole meal, challah and lechem mishnah. And other shuls, they don't serve anything. Some of them will tell you, well, you're supposed to eat it at home. Or some places they just say, well, we don't really make a big deal of Shalosh Shudas. People just eat a snack. So what does it say in Shulchan Aruch? So here, the Shulchan Aruch chapter 291, the Shulchan Aruch, at least in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, he brings that on the third meal, you don't have to say Kiddush because all you need is one Kiddush and you already did it by the day. But you do need to break bread on 2 complete loaves, like in the first meal. And even if you ate many meals on Shabbos, each meal needs lechem mishnah. That's the first thing he says. Then he says, v'yeshaimim, and some say that on the third meal, it's enough, that even the third meal, it's enough to have 1 loaf of bread. Why? Because on the 6th day, when the Yidden were in the desert, the manna came double portion. So it was 2 oimers. And how many loaves did they make from each oimer? An oimer is a certain measurement of flour, or a certain measurement. So how much of man, I should say? How many challahs did they make? So from every oimer, they made 2 challahs. So how many challahs did they have in the desert? They had 4 challahs. So the first night, they used 1 up. They did a lecha mishnah. They broke bread on 2. They used 1 up. The morning for the second meal, what did they have left? The second morning,
You have 3 challahs left.
they had 3 left.
They used 2 for
1 second.
meal.
Oh, I made 1 mistake. No wonder. Okay, something was wrong. The Friday, they needed 2 meals on Friday, and they needed to eat before Shabbos. So they made 4 loaves, but they ate 1 on Friday morning for breakfast, and they had 3 loaves left Friday night. On Friday night, they had 3 loaves left. So what did they do? They ate 1 Friday. They made lecha mishnah. They used 2 challahs, but they only ate 1 Friday night. Now they have 2 left. It's Shabbos morning. So they made lecha mishnah, and they ate 1 Shabbos morning. And now Saturday afternoon for Shalosh Shudas, how many loaves did they have left? They only had 1 left. This is a nice historical, interesting question. How did it work with the lecha mishnah in the desert, and the 2 oimers that they had a double portion. Normally they made themselves 2 loaves of bread. Now they made 4 loaves of bread, but the 4 loaves had to last for Friday and Shabbos. So they had Friday morning, Friday night, Shabbos morning, and then Shabbos afternoon. They're left with only 1. So therefore, you see that on Shalosh Shudas, all you really need is 1. And he says, and so is the minhag. It's that spread out over here. That all you need is 1 loaf for Shalosh Shudas. But you should be machmer to take 2, like the first opinion. That's the main opinion. Unless you don't have 2, then fine. Don't use at least 1 complete loaf, at least for because that's what they had in the desert. Then he says, but some are more lenient. Some are lenient, even more, that you could fulfill the 3rd meal with anything that's made from mezainis, that you recite the bracha mezainis. It's called the mazain. And some are even more lenient, that you could even fulfill it with without mezainis, without like cake, cookies, crackers, and things like that. But instead, you could even use things that you put on, you eat with bread, like for example, meat, fish, or similar things, but not with fruits. And some are even more lenient that even with fruits, you could fulfill your obligation of the 3rd meal of Shabbos. And you shouldn't rely at all on this, unless you have no other option, like you're very satisfied from the day meal and you can't eat anymore without paining yourself. Or, for example, on Erev Pesach that falls on Shabbos. If you have Shabbos and then you have Pesach that night, so there's a big problem of what do you eat for Shalosh Shudas? Because in the morning you were allowed to have bread before Pesach starts, and then you eat up your bread early in the morning. We had this last year, not this year Pesach, but the previous year we had to figure out a way of having exactly the right amount of bread and getting rid of it. So there's a whole complicated thing. So what do you do for Shalosh Shudas then? So the 3rd meal, you can't eat bread because it's already Pesach, and you can't eat matzah because matzah is you're not allowed to have it early, because you're supposed to have a desire for matzah. If you taste matzah before the time, the Gemara says it's as if you had relations with your fiance before the wedding. So that's eating matzah before the proper time is not allowed. So what do you do for Shalosh Shudas when Saturday night is the first Seder? So it says you can't eat bread. So so in that case you could be lenient for like these other leniencies. You could have let's say meat or fish or fruit and so on. Okay. And then the Alter Rebbe just mentions, he says, women are obligated just like men in the 3 meals and to do lecha mishnah in each of the meals. because in all the meals of Shabbos, all the actions of Shabbos, women and men are equal in their obligations. So anyway, that's the bottom line over here, is that there are leniencies for the third meal. So what happens then if you miss, let's say you forgot to say the addition in the third meal? If you missed it in the first meal of Friday night, you missed Ritzei, we just learned here. If you catch yourself in time, there's a certain bracha you can say. At a certain place, you could, the right place you're supposed to say Ritzei. You missed Ritzei, you just said the next paragraph, which is the Uvanei and the Baruch Atah Hashem B'nei Brachim Yishlaim Amen. Stop right there. Say a special bracha. You missed that first meal of Shabbos, Friday night meal. You got to go all the way back to the beginning. Shabbos day meal, you got to go all the way back to the beginning. Shabbos afternoon meal, the third meal of Shabbos, we just see a leniency now. You don't have to necessarily eat bread. What did our Gemara say? Our Gemara said that Rosh Chodesh, where you don't need to eat, and Taisus explains it means you don't need to eat bread. You can eat other things as long as you don't fast, so you don't have to go back for Rosh Chodesh. So what does that tell us about Shalosh Seudos? Seems like you have what to rely on, that you don't have to go back, because do you really need to eat bread for Shalosh Seudos? The answer is no. You don't really need to have bread for Shalosh Seudos. You could get away with eating other, we just saw, there's other leniencies. Mezainos, there were 3 levels. Mezainos, fish and meat, fruits. So Taisus over here at the end, he mentions that Usuda Shlishis, the top Taisus over here, says that for the third meal of Shabbos, the Ri was Mesupet. The Ri was unsure because maybe if you don't want to eat only Targima, Minei Targima, which has different meanings, it either means these things. It either means, Mezainos, or it means like fish and meat, means fruits and vegetables. But however you translate the Targima, there's different translations in the different commentaries. Fruit, pastry, leeks, and meat, fish, or maybe it has to be mezainos, something that you recite a mezainos on. But bottom line is, there maybe is leniency for Shalosh Seudos. This is Taisus over here, and like Rabbeinu Tam brings, he says they talk about it in the laws of Sukkah, because it has something to do with the missing out. If a person missed out in eating the first meal of Sukkot, according to one opinion, you could catch up on the last day of the Shmini Atzeres of Sukkot. And according to that opinion, it doesn't mean you eat a new meal. It means you just add to the meal on Shmini Atzeres, and you somehow have fulfilled, you have sort of compensated for what you missed on the first meal of Sukkot. Anyway, it's not the halacha, but there is such a idea there. So then Taisus says that there is a concept regarding in Tractate Ksubis regarding a person supporting his wife through a third party, that they need to have 3 meals of Shabbos, which sounds like all 3 meals are the same. So that's the opposite side. So the Ri is unsure if you need to have bread for the third meal. On the one hand, there's room to say you don't. And because just like in that case, that opinion regarding Sukkot, you missed one meal, you could just add to the other meal with an extra fruit or extra pastry, whatever it is, you add something. So that sounds like maybe a meal could be fulfilled with such a thing. A third meal of Shabbos could be fulfilled with such a thing. On the other hand, there is a source in Ksubis that implies that you would need to provide a meal similar to the other 2 meals of Shabbos. They're all equal. And then the third thing Taisus says is also, we do learn from the Mon, the fact that you learn all 3 meals, that we have to have 3 meals from Ichluhu Hayoim, Shabbos Hayoim Lashem, Hayoim Loisim Tu Basod. It says Hayoim 3 times, so we learn from the Mun that you need 3. So it sounds like you would need all 3 the same. So Taisus has this question: if you need to really have bread for Shalosh Shudas, and if you don't need to have bread, it would seem that you don't have to repeat the benching if you mess up, if you forgot Ritzei. And Taisus ends off, I'm not sure about the 3rd meal, but if you have a 4th meal on Shabbos, then for sure you don't have to repeat it, because no one told you to eat a 4th meal on Shabbos. You decided you're a person who likes to overeat, and you want to have a 4th meal on Shabbos. Shabbos is supposed to have 3 meals. You want to eat an extra meal, you're allowed to, but you definitely don't have to. And therefore, for sure, for the 4th meal, you do not repeat Ritzei. If you ate a 4th meal on Shabbos, you do not need to repeat the benching if you forgot today. Yes, David.